Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this conference today. It's very inspiring to see such enthusiasm for sustainable food systems, and it's great to see that there's a lot of examples of good activity happening in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe as well, and it's great to feel a part of this community. What I'm going to talk about today are my experiences which I've learned over the last 10 years as being a gardener and team member at Zsámboki Biokert, which is located, Zsámboki Biokert basically means the organic garden of Zsámbok. I like to start with this image because what it represents is that farms are very much social spaces. They're much more than places where seeds go in the ground and food comes out. Farms are living classrooms and very social spaces, and that's quite important. Our farm is not such a big farm. It's about 1 hour from Budapest. It was established in 2010. It became officially certified organic around then as well. It's not very large. It's about 4 hectares in total, but all of the vegetables come from about 1 hectare. We do have about 100 fruit trees, and we grow a lot of the vegetables throughout the seasons in polytunnels as well, which are basically plastic growing tunnels. We have 2,000 square meters of plastic growing tunnels. If we do cultivate the soil, we don't use machines. We use a horse for cultivating the soil. And in the last year, we also started having some sheep as well. And who is our team? It's always good to talk about who actually works on the farm. We're not a very big group. We're about 8 persons who work on the farm throughout the year, of very different age and background. And in addition to the people who work on the farm full time, we're very lucky to have a support network of some volunteers and also people who work from time to time, or perhaps 1 or 2 days per week, to help us with specific tasks, especially in relation to preparing boxes and orders. So a small farm, so under 5 hectares, is really important as a social initiative because it can provide employment to a high number of people. We are following the market gardening model. A few of the presenters so far have mentioned the phrase market gardening, but what I see market garden, it's a type of design for a farm which helps you maximize the value of a small area without exploiting the natural features of the area. So taking care of the soil, taking care of the natural elements, following organic practices. So I really encourage any of you out there who are thinking about starting a farm or trying to transition a garden into a farm which sustains itself to start looking into literature about organic intensive market gardens. And what are some of the properties of organic gardens? It's certainly cultivating intensively, even following organic production practices, a relatively small area, and doing most of the work by hand. So what you see in this photo here are permanent raised beds. So we never actually have to plow or turn the soil. We're growing in the same areas year after year. We're producing a lot in these select beds, and we're returning the nutrients back to the soil each year with the compost which we make on the farm. So it's one of the efficiency parts of the market garden design is getting the most out of a small area, which you could manage with a small team. Another important element is growing crops which have high value. I have here in the photo Oriental salad mix, which is in Hungary, not something that a lot of farmers grow, but it's a very high value crop and we could grow it very well. So if you're not growing a lot of crops, you have to specialize in those crops, which you can earn a lot back from. Another trick of market gardening could be season extension. So this means starting growing crops earlier so you have more to put in your box and sell, and having crops in the garden later, even when it starts getting colder. Using polytunnels and even growing vegetables. This picture has been taken in the winter just recently, a few weeks ago. So even in Hungary, where it can get quite cold in the winter, we can still grow vegetable greens in a polytunnel if you use a few low-tech techniques and if you pick the right varieties. So season extension is very important. Another important element is having a lot of high quality nutrient materials which you could return back to your garden. So it's quite rare that as a farm that we make all of our own compost, but it's probably the most important part of our operation, even if especially if we're growing intensively on the same area in each year. Putting compost on the area throughout the season and at the end of the season is very important. Another interesting part of market gardening is that we do most of the work by hand. We don't need tractors. We don't need big machines. The tool in which you see in this photo is what we use to cultivate the majority of our area. It's a wheel hoe. It's a Swiss tool. It's my favorite tool to use in the garden and one of the most efficient. And also something like a broad fork, which is a perfect tool for aerating the soil. So another advantage of market gardening style is that you can use quite simple tools, even some of them, which you can make yourself. There are a number of benefits overall to this type of garden design. Firstly, it's that you can maximize the value of a small area. You can remain financially independent of needing to be reliant on government subsidies. You can stay away from the common problem of gaining a lot of debt by continuously trying to farm a bigger area. You can get a higher value for products, especially if you pick some of the rarer items like salad greens and grow them well. And also you have a built-in resilience if you're growing a lot of different types of crops, because if it's a bad year for one type of crop, you won't end up with nothing to sell if you're growing many, many different things. It's a very natural resilience for maintaining healthy soil, and it's a natural resilience for making sure that you have a number of different products to sell all throughout the year. If you're interested in learning more about the proven methods for market garden design, you can look to the books by the two most well-known gurus or influential figures of market gardening, and that's Jean-Martin Fortier, who's a French Canadian, and Elliot Coleman, who's been doing this for more than 40 years in the US, but there's many other lots of helpful information out there in many, many different languages as well. I wanted to also provide some quite simple but very good questions to ask yourself, especially if you're just starting a farming project. Maybe you already have a piece of land, but I'm sure there's some people out there who are thinking about starting a new project. And I want to suggest some questions that you ask yourself before making your final decision. Of course, the location of the farm is very important, not just to ensure that you have good quality soil and a good piece of land, but you need to think about where the farm is in relation to where you will sell the products. So if your customers are in a city and you're far away from the city, you have to be able to calculate the costs that it would take to get your products to consumers. So the location is very important, not just for the natural properties of the land, but the how close you will be to an eventual customer base. You have to think about how the farm may be organized. Are you going to have an individual owner? Will you do it in a team? Will it be a cooperative? You have to think about the type of crops that you're going to cultivate, and you have to think about the financial goals. Do you want to only support yourself? Do you want to make a small business which gives a job opportunity to others? Or do you want more of a social enterprise which is shared by a larger number of people? And then, of course, beyond the production, beyond the business side, there's the important factors of the social purpose of the farm and its environmental commitments. And you can't really, all of these things need to be linked together. I'm not someone who likes to focus on the business strategy in life, but you can't pursue a farm with a high social value or a farm which is really doing its best to create a healthy ecosystem if it doesn't support itself financially. So we need to keep all of this in mind. The team members which you'll need to make a farm successful are very important. You'll need different types of people. some people who are experts in production, some people who are experts in harvesting and weeding, some people who are experts in administration. A small farm team needs to have a lot of different capacity. So finding people who can multitask and do a lot of different types of work is really important. We shouldn't forget the importance of collaborating with those who do not work on the farm. So as Vincent mentioned, creating links with actors, local actors who might help you, NGOs, civic groups, students. You're going to need to do this as a small farm working to try to find a way to survive. And of course, before you start or before you move forward in developing a garden plan, having a clear idea of who your customer base is essential to make sure that the whole thing's going to work. I'll go into how we do this, but I'm going to focus more now on the marketing strategy, and I'm going to explain how our garden, Zsámboki Biokert, ended up developing a diverse marketing strategy. So we are a farm which is part of a community agricultural system. We don't practice a traditional subscription-based CSA, and we survive on a mix of having a weekly box system, selling our products in a market each week, and having a relationship with a few food cooperatives as well. I talk a lot with students and even some beginner gardeners, and I always like to mention that most people who get into agriculture can solve the problems related to producing food, to producing fruits and vegetables. The biggest problem which most people face, especially those who are trying to do this as a career, is what do you do once the product is produced? There are a number of ways in which you can get food to people or to sell your products. Some of them require a more direct connection to consumers. Some of them a less direct connection. So what I've tried to list here are basically all of the options that you have as a farmer who has grown a product. The items on the left side are the ones in which involve the least social connection. The ones on the right side, in which we're focusing the most on in this conference, like a CSA subscription system or a weekly box system or a mix of the both, they result in the closest connection between producers and consumers and provide the most support to farms. But the reality is that for a farm to survive, it has to find the right mixture which works for the farm, which is based on prices, which is based on time, which is based on competition within the local market, and the farm's ability to communicate and create a network around it. So although I'm an advocate for direct connection between consumers and producers, in the end, it's up to the producer to decide what works best for their type of farm. And you must choose a system which is compatible with your capabilities as a producer. A farmer must also choose a system which is connected to its social and environmental goals. And lastly, we can't expect that consumers will support us just because we're organic farmers or just because we're permaculture farmers. We need to be realistic about competition in the market, and we need to offer something of value to consumers. So what works best for us is having a model which is inspired by a traditional CSA, but with a bit more flexibility for the customer. So each week we create a box offer of two fixed boxes, a large box and a small box, but the customer also has the option to create a completely unique order from an extra vegetable list. We used to be more strict about only having fixed boxes, but we realized that once we offered the flexibility for people to create their own orders, our weekly order number became much more stable. So at first, this was a challenge for us to figure out how to be able to pack and prepare unique orders, but it made our system much more stable. We also sell vegetables at a weekly organic market, which happens in Budapest. It's the only market which is realistically viable or or the only potentially good market for us, because only organic producers can sell there. It's not worthwhile for us to take organic products to a market where there are conventional producers, because people will see the difference in price and they don't understand why it's different, and it doesn't work for us. There's our weekly organic box system. It's comprised of products which come for our farm, but I would like to mention that we also sell the products of other organic Hungarian producers in our box offer. It helps us throughout the year so that when we don't have a high quantity of a product, we can still, by working with partners, have a lot of vegetables to offer. And we don't see this as a weakness in the system, because we see this as building a solidarity network of organic producers within the country. So we're happy to also offer the products of other producers. There's a lot of background work on the farm which isn't connected to the vegetables, which needs to happen and happen efficiently for the system to work, like communication, like counting orders, like working with the accountant and paying bills. So there's a lot of things that you need to do well before the food gets to its final customer. But to make a weekly organic box system work, you need these different actors. You need the farm team, you need other producers who you might work with, you need people who can help with distribution, and a customer base. I go through this quickly because I know we're running short on time, but if you want to have an idea of what we produce basically anything that you can produce throughout the season in Hungary. So in each year, more than 100 different vegetable varieties. We specialize in leafy greens because it's the most valuable product for us. If you have the capacity for processing food, it's a way to ensure that you can have products to sell later in the season. So you could turn your tomatoes, which you grew in the summer, and you could have them to put in your boxes in the autumn and throughout the winter. So experimenting with processing is also very important. The best form of creating a customer base is to open up the gates of your garden and invite people who might potentially, who might potentially buy your products to the farm. And also maintaining a quite active social media base is very important. We're regularly communicating with our customers or those interested in us through a blog and through a Facebook page and online.
Okay.
Now just
Lohan, I'm sorry, we have no time anymore.
Okay.
Maybe 1 minute if it
I'll
will
just
be
end
enough.
this is where I would have ended anyway, so I'll end here. So 1 minute just saying why we didn't choose a traditional subscription-based CSA is because the customers in Hungary, in our region, like the flexibility of not having to pay a lot ahead of time. It's not realistic for us at all to try to sell to big supermarkets or restaurants, so we don't try that. Direct markets only work when it's specifically a market for selling organic products. And also lastly, we find helping other producers to sell their own organically produced products a strong part of what we do.
Thank you very much. Wow, so many information. We have a lot of positive comments from our participants, and we have really a lot of questions. How do you balance your pests? And do you have such big red snails on your plot?
So pests, it's an important question. Our crop rotation and the diversity of our crop rotation is our biggest strength against pests, against disease. So having a diversity of a crop rotation helps. Where we're located geographically, it's quite helpful because it's not a very forested area, which in some ways is unfortunate, but we don't have slugs or snails. When we grow cabbages, you could see we protect them with fleece, which is a cover, which doesn't allow the moth or the cabbage flea to attack the cabbages. So it's mostly crop rotation, physical separation or protection, and also for taking care of the plants, weeding by hand.
Thank you very much. And one more question. Facebook is a lot, but not ethical. How do you use such a platform in an ethical permaculture environment?
So if we're talking about social media, we existed for 10 years without having any social media presence. We do write a blog regularly, which we write and post on our own website, our own homepage, which gives a description of the work that happens on the farm each week, very openly. And we find that a lot of people read it because they're truly interested in finding out what happens on the farm. But I would be honest and say that what happens online is not the most important type of outreach or activism for us. So I personally, I work on the farm, but I live in the city. In a times outside of COVID, probably 2 or 3 times a month, I'm giving a talk or participating in an event somewhere in the city. So speaking directly with people person to person. In the pre-COVID times, we also, especially when the season was nice weather, twice per month or 3 times per month had open activities on the farm, which are great for advertising what we do, but they take a lot of our time. So you have to manage them wisely as well. But I certainly are someone who enjoys in-person experiences much more than any type of social media or blogging from behind a computer screen.